Welcome to the debate. When you board a commercial flight and you glance into the cockpit, there is this innate expectation of, well, absolute verified authority.
Right. You want to see the crisp uniform, the epaulets.
Exactly. The uniform, the thousands of logged flight hours. If the person sitting in the captain's chair turned around and said, hey, I don't have a license, but I just read a highly specific PDF on how to land a Boeing 737, you would immediately demand to get off that plane.
Oh, absolutely. But the stakes there are literally life and death. We rely on those institutional barriers to keep us safe in the physical world.
Right. It's deeply ingrained market logic. We are socially conditioned to equate competence with traditional credentials. But today, we are stepping into a landscape where those institutional barriers are supposedly, well, entirely irrelevant.
Which is the exploding global e-learning and digital product market.
Exactly. An industry that is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And the central question we are debating today is this. Is it realistically possible for a complete beginner with zero credentials, zero existing audience, and no product to generate meaningful income by selling digital products?
And we are grounding this discussion in a specific framework from the source material, one that claims to have generated over $100 million in sales, entirely starting from scratch.
Right, so I'll be representing the perspective that in a highly competitive market, the necessity for established authority and an audience makes this beginner blueprint highly improbable.
And I will be taking the opposing view, arguing that hyperspecificity and problem-solving inherently bypass the need for traditional credentials or, a pre-existing platform.
So let me lay out my foundational skepticism here. The e-learning space is massive, but it is also incredibly crowded. You have established universities like Harvard and MIT offering online courses.
Sure, the big players.
Right. You have industry veterans with millions of social media followers, and platforms like eClass featuring literal celebrities. Competition is exceptionally fierce. In any normal economic model, consumers buy based on trust.
Okay, but how are you defining trust here?
Well, trust is a currency that you have to earn over time. We can call it the trust curve. You either earn it through formal credentials, the PhD, the certification, the decades in the industry, or you earn it by cultivating a massive engaged audience. An audience who trusts your voice because you've been delivering free value for years.
Right, I see where you're going with this.
The premise of the source material we are examining today is that you don't need to be an expert. It explicitly says you don't need credentials and you don't need a following. To me, that defies basic market logic. How can a complete unknown, operating in a vacuum, convince a stranger to part with their hard-earned money?
I come at it from a completely different way. I think your assumption about how consumer trust functions is completely accurate for certain markets like commercial aviation or neurosurgery or broad academic theory.
Okay.
But when we look at the digital product economy, we have to fundamentally redefine what the market actually values. The core thesis from the material isn't that trust doesn't matter. It's that people don't actually pay for credentials in this space. They pay for shortcuts.
Shortcuts.
Yes, they pay to close what we might call the implementation gap. We are drowning in free information, but we are starving for specific execution. The barrier to entry that you're describing, this need for a vast audience and a wall of diplomas, is actually an illusion.
An illusion. That's a strong word.
It is, but it's shattered by what the material introduces as Jason Fladlien's 1-1-1 formula. One audience, one problem, one solution. When you narrow the focus that intensely, the traditional markers of authority become secondary to the actual utility of the solution you're offering.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Even if I grant that utility and execution are important, I still return to the origin of the information. I wouldn't buy a medical textbook from someone who isn't a doctor.
Well, no, of course not.
Right, regardless of how well organized the index is or how actionable the advice claims to be. So why would anyone buy a guide or a template or a course from a total novice? If I'm paying for a shortcut, I need to know the person drawing the map has actually navigated the terrain.
That is a compelling argument, but have you considered the actual nature of the products we are talking about? You're using the analogy of a medical textbook, which implies a comprehensive, exhaustive transfer of universal knowledge.
Yes, but a course is transferring knowledge.
But the material specifically points out that the most successful beginner products are micro-solutions. Let's look at the evidence provided in the text. Consider the lettings agent who spent years writing the exact same types of emails over and over.
The one dealing with the properties.
Right. Chasing late rent, handling routine maintenance requests, responding to standard tenancy inquiries. She didn't write a theoretical treatise on real estate law. She simply packaged 30 of those ready-to-send email templates into standard Word documents and sold them on Etsy for $17.
Wait, okay, so just a folder of Word documents? There wasn't a massive, highly produced course attached to it? No video modules?
No course, no webinar, no massive marketing funnel, which, for our listeners, is just the series of web pages designed to guide a visitor toward a purchase. It was literally just the templates.
And people actually bought that?
Yes, because it saved other lettings agents 2 hours a week of staring at a blank screen. The buyer doesn't care if she has a master's degree in business administration or 10,000 Twitter followers.
They just want the problem gone.
Exactly. They care that the problem figuring out what to say to a hostile tenant about a leaky roof without creating legal liability is instantly solved for $17. And if you want an even more extreme example of how specificity trumps credentials, look at the eBay Live Roach Seller.
Ah, the roach seller. I was wondering when we would get to the insects.
It's the perfect illustration of hyperspecificity. Someone built a highly lucrative business selling live roaches on eBay as feed for reptiles. And the material points out that a 20-page PDF titled How to Build a Six-Figure Business Selling Live Insects Online would essentially sell itself for anywhere between $7 and $47.
Just a 20-page PDF.
Right.
Why?
Because it perfectly matches the buyer's exact, weirdly specific need. If I want to breed and ship live insects, I don't want a generic business course from a Harvard MBA.
Let me stop you right there. Are you saying the lack of credentials, the actual amateur nature of the product is the selling point?
Yes.
Because if I'm looking to breed insects and I see a polished, studio-produced business course from a Harvard MBA, I'm getting high-level supply chain theory. But if I buy the unpolished 20-page PDF from the roach guy, I'm buying the literal street-level mechanics from someone who has roach dirt under their fingernails.
You've got it.
So the lack of polish is almost proof of utility.
Exactly. You've just hit on the exact paradigm shift the material is trying to provoke. The lack of traditional polish signals authentic, in-the-trenches experience. The market rewards the effective shortcut, not the pedigree of the person offering it.
That is a fascinating shift in perspective. I will concede that a hyper-specific, low-priced item like a $17 template or a small PDF can secure a sale based purely on utility.
Because it's a no-brainer impulse buy.
Right, if it saves me 2 hours, $17 is nothing. I'll grant you the micro-solution concept works at the micro level. But the material isn't just talking about making pocket change on Etsy.
No, it's not.
It references generating serious life-changing income. It talks about a framework responsible for over $100 million in sales. When we shift from a $17 template to high-ticket items like comprehensive video courses that sell for hundreds of dollars, the game changes.
How so?
Those require high production value. You need a studio, you need a camera crew, you need professional lighting, and you need months of development to justify the price tag. A beginner simply doesn't have those resources.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. You are still applying legacy media standards to the digital creator economy. The material systematically breaks down this exact assumption using the Jay Boyer case study.
Remind me of the Jay Boyer numbers?
He enrolled in an earlier version of this very training, product eClass, and by his second week, he had made over $10,000.
Hold on. $10,000 in week 2 implies massive scale. If you don't have an audience to promote to for free, you have to buy advertisements to reach people.
Not necessarily.
But a complete beginner doesn't have the thousands of dollars in capital required to run Facebook or YouTube ads to generate 10 grand in sales. The math simply doesn't work for me. How are they getting eyeballs on the product without an audience or an ad budget?
By intercepting existing demand rather than trying to create it. In marketing, we talk about push versus pull. Building an audience or running ads is push marketing. You are pushing your message in front of people who are just scrolling social media, trying to convince them to care.
Right, which is expensive and time-consuming.
Exactly. The material advocates for pull marketing. Week 1 of the Realistic Beginner Timeline isn't about setting up social media accounts. It's strictly about validating demand on search-based platforms.
So looking at what people are already typing in?
Yes. You go to where people are already typing in their credit card numbers, like Udemy, Amazon Kindle, or Google. You look for highly specific search terms that have high search volume but terrible, outdated products. Jay Boyer didn't need to push his product onto a cold audience. He placed his hyper-specific solution exactly where a hungry crowd was already looking for it.
Okay, I understand the mechanism of intercepting search intent, finding the gap where people are searching but not finding good answers. But that still doesn't address the production value barrier for a course that makes 10 grand.
The production quality is entirely secondary to the niche and the problem being solved. Jay recorded a video course at home. No studio, no camera crew. All he used was basic screen recording software and clear audio.
Really? Just a screen recording?
That is all it takes to deliver value. If the information on the screen solves the specific problem the buyer has, they do not care if there isn't a 3-point lighting setup and a cinematic backdrop. In fact, overproduction often signals, guru fluff.
Interesting. So the raw look is better.
A raw screen share implies a trusted look over my shoulder while I do the work. You define your product in week 2 using the 111 formula, and you create it in week 3. A short ebook takes a weekend. A mini course takes a single day of recording. You aren't outlining a masterclass, you outline a precise intervention.
Okay, I buy that. A hyper-focused ebook can be written over a weekend. The friction isn't the writing, it's the technology. Let's look at week 4 of this timeline.
The launch phase.
Right. The moment a beginner hits the wall of, how do I build a secure checkout page? How do I automate the email delivery of the PDF? How do I handle European VAT taxes? They freeze. The timeline breaks down because you need a software developer to string all these systems together.
10 years ago, you would be absolutely right. The technical barrier was a massive graveyard for digital product ideas. But the material makes a crucial point here. None of this requires a developer anymore.
It has to require some technical skill.
It really doesn't. The technology is essentially plug and play. In week 4, you use a checkout solution like Gumroad, which basically acts as a ready-made digital cash register. You literally just upload your PDF, type in the price, and they handle the secure credit card processing, the automated email delivery of the file, and even the international taxes.
Oh wow, they handle the taxes too?
Everything. It takes 10 minutes to set up. That is how someone goes from absolute zero to a live digital product in 1 month.
Well, I'm not fully convinced by that line of reasoning because you're leaving out the most critical hurdle. Let's say I follow the 4-week timeline perfectly. I do the research, I intercept the search intent, I write the hyper-specific ebook, I upload it to the digital cash register.
Okay, sounds like a successful launch.
But I still have a major problem. And frankly, the source material explicitly admits this. There's a section where it discusses the silent failure of beginners.
Yes. The silent failure.
It openly admits that many beginners create a decent product, they get people to look at the page, but they get 0 conversions, meaning nobody actually pulls out their credit card to buy it. They fail silently. To me, this is the smoking gun.
How so?
This proves that an audience and an established brand are necessary. If you don't have an audience who already trusts you, your product just sits on a server gathering digital dust. The failure isn't in the product creation. The failure is in the lack of a platform to communicate its value.
You've identified a very real friction point. But I think you're misinterpreting what causes that silent failure. The text acknowledges that getting traffic to a page and getting 0 conversions is devastating, but it reframes exactly why that happens.
It's because they don't have an audience?
No. It's not because the creator lacked 1 million Twitter followers or a recognizable brand name. It happens because they failed to articulate who the product is for, what problem it solves, and why it's worth the price. It is a failure of positioning.
But isn't articulating value exactly what having a brand and an audience does for you automatically? If I know and trust you, you don't have to work as hard on the sales page to convince me. I'm buying you, not just the product.
That's entirely true. An audience is a massive shortcut to trust. But the absence of an audience doesn't mean you can't build trust right there on the sales page. The material argues that communicating value, positioning, pricing, and presenting the offer is a mechanical, learnable skill.
So it's not tied to identity?
Not at all. It is not an innate biological trait, and it is not exclusively tied to having a massive audience. It's about shifting the language from features to benefits. Beginners fail silently because they build a product they think is interesting, and they describe the object itself.
Like, here is a folder of 30 email templates?
Exactly. That's a feature. Good positioning describes the emotional relief. Stop wasting 2 hours every evening arguing with tenants over leaky roofs. That's a benefit.
So you're saying the silent failure isn't the lack of inherent authority, it's simply a failure of copywriting.
That is exactly it. Let's look at the ultimate proof point from the text, Jason Fladlien himself. He has now generated over $100 million in product sales. But how did he start?
With an ebook, right?
In 2007, he wrote a $4 ebook in a single sitting. He had zero platform, he had zero credentials, he had absolutely no audience. But what he did have was the ability to position that small $4 micro solution in a way that made buying it feel like the most obvious decision in the world.
Huh.
The ability to translate the utility of your product into compelling language is the bridge between obscurity and sales.
Well, I'll grant that the 1-1-1 formula is a brilliant way to bypass the need for traditional credentials. The mechanics of intercepting search intent rather than paying for ads make logical sense.
It changes the whole equation.
It does. And looking at the evidence, the lettings agent who packaged her daily shortcuts, the incredible specificity of the roach seller, the realization that a lack of polish can actually serve as proof of street-level utility, it forces a shift in perspective. It becomes clear that in the digital product economy, knowing enough to be one step ahead is a highly valued commodity.
It is. The digital economy asks a much simpler, more democratic question than traditional industries. Can you solve this one specific problem for me right now?
I agree with that premise. But I remain unconvinced that a beginner can master the nuance of positioning a product effectively without years of trial and error.
You think the learning curve is too steep.
I do. The silent failure risk, the inability to write copy that converts features into emotional benefits, is still too high a barrier in my view. I just don't think a 4-week timeline is enough to learn the complex psychology of sales and positioning from scratch.
And that is a completely fair line to draw. Our fundamental disagreement today really comes down to execution. You believe the friction of learning to sell is too high for a complete beginner. I believe this specific framework bridges that gap by making the copywriting as methodical as the product creation.
Right. But for listeners who want to test which of us is right and see if the communication piece is truly learnable, the source material actually offers the foundational training for free.
Oh, so the exact methodology we've been debating is available to review? Where do they start? Yes, it points readers straight to Jason Fladlien's free training. It is a comprehensive breakdown of the exact mechanics behind his $100 million in sales, designed specifically for people starting from absolute scratch.
Okay, that sounds like a good place to start.
It teaches exactly what we've been discussing, not just product creation, but the positioning, the pricing, and the presentation that attempts to make the sale inevitable. Listeners can go directly to jasonfladlienproducteclass.com/free training. It serves as the clearest introduction to what a modern digital product business actually looks like when you remove the "I'm not an expert" objection.
It's a fascinating paradigm to explore. We began this discussion by looking at the traditional gatekeepers of expertise, the pilot's license, the medical degree, the decades of vetted experience.
The institutional barriers.
Right, and while those will always be vital in their respective fields, the digital product landscape operates on a completely different frequency. Whether the execution is as seamless as the framework suggests remains up for debate, but the opportunity is undeniably present.
Absolutely.
We will leave it there for today. When you look at your own daily routines, your own frustrations, and your own shortcuts, you might just realize that the rough, unpolished blueprint you've been using to survive your workday is exactly what someone else is desperately searching for. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.